First of all, thanks everyone for joining us today on this webinar from Spendflo and the SaaS CFO on the 4th annual Financial Tech Stack report by Ben. Let me just start with a quick round of introductions. So my name is Rajiv, co-founder of Spendflo, and we help fast-growing companies save up to 30% on their technology spends. Today, SaaS is one of the fastest growing expenses for companies, growing at over 25% year on year. And saving costs on SaaS is a very difficult initiative for a lot of companies because you need strong benchmark data and a team to manage that. So we provide it in a platter to you, and we guarantee our outcomes. And I'm extremely happy to have this webinar with Ben today because for finance community, Ben has been someone like, it's almost like a person who has led a lot of the movement and metrics, I would say, in SaaS world for all of us, right? So Ben has been instrumental in uncovering different kinds of metrics, how we should be thinking about our business. I've been following Ben for quite some time and learned a lot just looking at his posts and interacting with him. So it's a pleasure to have you here with us today, Ben. More than me introducing Ben, it would be good if Ben can give us a quick walkthrough of his journey and an introduction, and before we jump into the report.
Yeah, thanks, Rajiv. Great to be here. I'm calling in from Denver, Colorado. So yeah, great to be here. If we haven't met on a webinar or in a chat or email, my name is Ben Murray. I've been in finance and accounting my entire career. Of course, CFO by trade in the airline industry, then got into software, came up through the ranks of FP&A to become SaaS CFO, founder and private equity-backed businesses, and now live and breathe SaaS, teach courses in SaaS metrics, fractional CFO work, part of the SaaS Metrics Standards Board. And Rajiv, one question that I got asked all the time, because I started a blog about 7 years ago, and that's grown up to be a big newsletter, a lot of following there. Just what tech should I use? What accounting system should I use? What should I use for this, this, and this? And I'm like, hey, great idea. Pull my audience and pull a tech stack report together. And now I'm on my 4th annual, and it expands every year.
Fantastic, Ben. And I think it's been phenomenal learning for all of us to see the evolution on this tech stack, and just going through your reports year on year and your posts year on year gives us a lot more insights on how we should think about technology and automation and how finance is also getting benefited by that. So, but before we go into the report, Ben, I also have a couple of questions for you, right? To warm up for the tech report insight. Right? So my first question to you is, what are the top trends you've been seeing in the financial technology adoption, right? And even primarily in the light of the current economic crisis, how this has changed. So would love to hear your insights on that.
Yeah, what I'm seeing in the back office, and I don't use that term in a bad way, right? I live in the back office, but it's expanding, and with my tech stack report, I used to call it the finance and accounting tech stack report, but now the categories are growing. There are more tools and software available to those managing the finance, accounting, and operations function now than ever. And especially as revenue models change, pricing models change, and SaaS specifically, that's creating new categories within the back office that we need to manage our business. So you're seeing more tools, more software available, but also we know in the 2023 climate, everybody's scrutinizing their spend. Do they really need this additional tool? Should they pull back and consolidate their tool set? So I see it's kind of both. We're seeing expanding categories, but then also really scrutinize the spend, because we know over time, spend on internal use software grows and grows and grows.
Absolutely. And that is something that we also see firsthand. So my second question is, yes, technology stack has been growing quite significantly, but how should finance teams really think about their tech stack progression? Where should they start? How should they progress?
Yeah, and we'll go into some slides here, some highlights from my tech stack report. But yeah, I always say, just like your dev team has their product roadmap, in finance and accounting, we need our own product roadmap. And often the CFO is involved in other decisions influencing the product roadmap internally for the entire org. So we have to think about, what are those acute pain points coming up? Is our core accounting good? Do we need to improve our invoicing, RevRec? Do we now have to figure out sales tax compliance? So there's a certain progression, and a lot of these slides will cover that. But we have to figure out our own product roadmap, what are those acute pain points that we need to solve first, and what's later down the road.
Awesome. And my last question before we go into the report in detail is, what, according to you, are the top 5 functions of finance that require automation and why do you say so?
Yeah, and a lot of these slides will cover that. So yeah, the top 5, I mean, of course, right, we need accounting software. And I've even talked to some founders who are starting out, still managing with their bank account, have no financial statements. So of course, core accounting software. And then, all right, we've got to get cash from our customers. So we have to invoice them. So invoicing is so important. SaaS can become very complex. And then revenue management, right? In SaaS, very important that we have RevRec in place. Then potentially sales tax compliance. Of course, our HRS system is important. Our CRM system is important. So those are some of those initial items that I'm looking at that build that core foundation that we're going to build from.
Great. Thanks, Ben. And now I want to hand it over to you to walk us through some of your insights from the annual report. I can't wait to listen to it.
Yeah. So let's start with FP&A. I came up through the ranks of FP&A, so near and dear to my heart. And we saw in 2022, and even now, FP&A is a hot space for M&A activity. A couple FP&A tools being purchased for some big amounts. But you can see here, right, spreadsheets still dominate a lot of categories. We know we start in spreadsheets a lot, then we move that process to formal software. But for forecasting, budgeting, still starting in spreadsheets. Of course, through my blog site, I've got tons of templates, forecast models in Excel, and we start there. And then what's that right point to transition? So you can see Adaptive Insights, Mosaic.tech, Planful, Forecaster, and a whole host are some of those top solutions. And again, if you're not familiar with the My Tech Stack report, this was SaaS focused. So what are SaaS companies using in their operations to drive their tech stack here? So in this case, I had almost 400 participants in the survey, a nice distribution across ARR size and employee size. But this one, spreadsheets are really holding strong. And then you can see ARR size, then, right, this is really important as our company scales, our tech stack scales, and changes. So you can see the blue spreadsheets still dominating less than 10 million, even in the 11 to 50 million category, a little bit surprising, that spreadsheets are still at play. But then you can see 51 million and up, then we see Adaptive coming in, Mosaic, Planful, Forecaster, etc. So tech stack scales and changes as our company grows.
Yeah. Is that because there's a lot of compliance that is coming in, Ben, or they need to report more like professionally and stuff like that? Or what do you think is one of the reasons why this happens?
Yeah, I think, you'll see in some of these, like the 10 million line, 11 million is a big changeover. And that's what I found myself personally, is that above 10 million, things are becoming more complex, more product lines. We're hiring, or maybe we're acquired, or maybe we're acquiring companies. And the reporting needs and requirements become more complex. Your board wants more data from you. Your investors want more data. And spreadsheets, it's all of a sudden, it just breaks down, and it's just so hard to keep up. And then you do need some sort of solution to help you out here.
Cool.
And then, of course, invoicing, billing, right? So important, because there's so many different ways we can invoice in SaaS. We could have subscription, we could have variable consumption, transaction, usage, services, managed services. We could have even selling hardware with our point of sale solution. So invoicing is so important. And what we want to take from here is you can see those top 3 still core accounting solutions. Maybe that functionality within our accounting system is fine, that we can still invoice from QBO, invoice from NetSuite and Sage Intacct. But then you can see Stripe, a big player in SaaS companies, and using Stripe for our invoicing functionality, embedding that in our product. And then Maxio, the combination of SaaS Optics and Chargeify to handle invoicing and eventually revenue management. So a mix when invoicing comes into play here. Can our existing accounting system handle the complexity, the use cases, or do we need a point solution to add on to our core accounting solution to make our life a little bit easier and have that flexibility with a solution that is just built for SaaS invoicing? And then one thing, Rajiv, just notice the homegrown at 5%. That actually was a trend in this year's survey. More people, and I don't know if it's recommended, building their own billing solution internally, because maybe things are just so complex and that these other solutions can't handle that use case. So that was an interesting trend, this year with homegrown.
Yeah. That's very interesting to know. And another thing that I'm also seeing very regularly is people moving towards PLG and also consumption-based pricing. So even the regular invoicing should be very dynamic today. And the systems are people are expecting more from these systems to cover up more line items, more bundling options to launch new products more quickly. In fact, in my previous experience, because of the lack of flexibility of the billing system, some of our product launches were delayed. So the sheer depth of the billing system and the width of the extension capabilities in these systems become extremely critical, is what I'm thinking over the next few years.
Yeah, definitely. And I see someone raising their hand, but please, if you have any questions, throw it in the Q&A box, and we're going to handle Q&A at the end. So please fill that up with any questions. We'll take that at the end. But you're right, Rajiv. I mean, how we're monetizing our product, how we're gating our product, right? Finance has to stay up with that. And that gets into advanced billing and invoicing, that we have to keep up with how the product wants to be delivered, how sales wants to sell the product. And we have to stay in lockstep with that. So yeah, this next slide again by ARR size. So you can see on the left, of course, QuickBooks, the dark blue, and then Stripe. You can see a lot of QuickBooks and Stripe early on, less than 10 million. Of course, a whole host of invoicing solutions here, but you can see really interesting 11 million and above. QuickBooks drops, things become more complex as we scale. And now you're seeing more of those ERP solutions, NetSuite, Sage Intacct come into play. And then of course, Maxio and some others here, so as our company scales, more product lines, more complexity, more revenue types potentially. And we've got to stay, in the finance function, make sure we stay, in step with how our product team is pushing our product forward.
Fantastic.
And then of course, I always say in SaaS, our RevRec must be bulletproof, right? We have to have solid revenue management platforms in place, right? How are SaaS companies valued? Based on our recurring revenue. We've got to be able to trust that recurring revenue that we're posting to our P&L each month. So usually, right, early on, we're cash basis, we're not doing any RevRec, but eventually we have to put revenue management in place. I say it should be as early as 3 million ARR, because our company's scaling. We have to make really good decisions based on our P&L. So putting rev management in place. Now you can see I started in some companies, we start with spreadsheets. So you can see spreadsheets, still some activity here that becomes too complex eventually. And then we need to move that into solutions. So again, a mix here of core accounting ERP solutions. You see Sage and NetSuite neck and neck for revenue management. NA, so people just not doing any RevRec, which, again, not surprising. And then similar to the invoicing, we see Maxio in there, Unium, kind of a new entrant to the chart this year, ChargeBee, relative new players where we're curly, so some of those common players here. So, right, we're invoicing our customers. Now we've got to apply the correct revenue recognition framework. Sometimes that's a function, a module within our ERP system, or sometimes like a Maxio, that's a bolt-on to our core accounting software. And then again, by company ARR size, right, this is really clear. So you see spreadsheets less than 10 million dominate, but a clear change at 11 million and above. Spreadsheets still in there, but you can see the orange and gray boxes. So Sage and NetSuite, strong players, and then Maxio. So above 10 million, 11 million, it makes sense, right? We've got to have revenue management in place. We've got to pass audit. We've got to provide GAAP, IFRS financials to our board, to our investors, potential investors. So above 10, absolutely critical. Below that, maybe you can get away with things, but eventually you have to put revenue management in place.
And Ben, one question here. So when we talk about revenue recognition in SaaS primarily, right? So we also talk about services revenue that is coming up. So it's not just pure license revenues that we need to account for, etc. Right? So how do you think services revenues are accounted for by SaaS companies today? And does the choice of software really enable you to launch more services better and recognize that revenue and attribute it to your P&L quickly, or how are these rated?
Yeah, I mean, for those who have services revenue, you onboard, you configure, set up your customers, know the pain of doing that manually. So if you have some sort of PSA system in place, professional services automation that hooks to your accounting system, when to invoice. But yeah, services is often forgotten that you actually have to apply RevRec to that too. Are we invoicing in milestones based on certain milestones that then we can invoice and recognize? Are we doing installment payments for our services? We have to be really careful with our year-end cutoff of services that get scrutinized, in the audit process. So same thing, every revenue stream, especially services, really important to have that integration to your project management system, so you know when to invoice and how to recognize.
Thanks.
And then analytics. Now, this is a big bucket. I think I'm going to refine this a little bit further next year into, say, for the SaaS group, SaaS metrics, and just general analytics. But beyond analytics, how are we slicing and dicing our data? Of course, spreadsheets still prevalent, but Tableau, Power BI, definitely those two have been strong in this category to slice and dice and present our data. Looker is a common one. And then you see ChartMogul, Domo, Unia, Mosaic, and Metabase. So a lot of players in this space. But Power BI, Tableau, really holding in strong in those top two positions. So general analytics and just those common solutions that we see in SaaS to slice and dice our data, plus then to publish them. And then by AR size, right? No surprise here. Less than 10 million, of course, we're slicing and dicing in spreadsheets. The gray and yellow NA. Power BI, I used Power BI in the past because we had a Microsoft Office license. You could just add that, inexpensively to your tech stack. But then above that, it gets a little bit more complex. Of course, again, that 10 million line, then you see Tableau, Power BI, some NA, but then, there's a lot of data to crunch. And again, that 10 million line, a big change in how are people, leveraging all this data. It's so underestimated, Rajiv, with looking at tech stack spend, there's so much data still trapped in SaaS businesses. And how are we leveraging this within our business? Is that in an existing platform that we can use, like our Microsoft Office license and use Power BI, or do we need a specific point solution integrating all these sources together? And man, what a huge project. And then core accounting. Okay, so, right, this is such a common question. What's the core accounting solution here? And the top 4 players in the SaaS space, again, it's QuickBooks, it's NetSuite, it's Sage, Xero. That has not changed. Now, I've seen Xero trailing off. It seems to be Xero's trailing off with Sage and NetSuite chipping away at QuickBooks market share. But again, QuickBooks still holding strong. I see more Xero internationally outside of the US, more QuickBooks, in the US. And then Microsoft Dynamics, maybe a little surprising, I don't know, and a whole host of other solutions. But these top 4 players holding strong. And again, what's our foundation? Are we going to use QuickBooks Xero and integrate point solutions like we've seen in those previous slides? Or are we going to integrate a Maxio for invoicing and rev management? Or are we going to go to a Sage Intacct NetSuite and utilize all the modules with, just start unlocking modules within those systems? And when one slide, and we'll have to put a link, Rajiv, to my full report, I ask, would you prefer best of breed point solutions or an ERP, which is a huge debate, right, in 2023. And right now, still people will go with best of breed point solutions. According to my survey, they're still okay with that, if it's best of breed. And that actually was consistent across all ARR. So it doesn't mean, if you're a 100 million ARR company, we have to consolidate. They still consider best of breed.
Wow. Then there is also a huge opportunity for integrations to play out here, because ultimately point solutions, the biggest, one of the concerns that we've seen is the more point solutions you bring in, it is also very difficult for you to integrate the data and come back with a common view for the business. So that is why the best of the monolith solutions were ruling the roost before. But yeah, now even it is very consistent with what we see in the tech stack in other areas as well, like marketing or development or something like that. People really want to do their job the best way possible. So people are buying more and more tools for specific functions, and that is something that is very powerful, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we'll get to that, but it's like we, especially in 2023, leverage the technology that we have in place, because especially in finance accounting, so transaction oriented, process oriented, we're processing so much data that we just can't do this manually. We have to have tech involved.
For sure.
And then again, by company ARR size for core accounting solutions. And again, a big break point at that 10, 11 million ARR range and above. So you can see the dark blue QuickBooks, not a surprise, dominating less than 10 million, along with a whole host of other solutions. But at 10 million and above, still see QuickBooks, but now you see NetSuite and Sage enter, right? Which makes sense. Our SaaS business is becoming more complex. invoicing is more complex, revenue management is more complex. So we need solutions in our accounting ERP suite to handle that. So that's always the common question. How long can I write QuickBooks? How long can I write Xero? Do I add point solutions, or do I just jump to an ERP system? And it's a big decision, but you can see a clear change at 11 million and above here.
Yeah, it just makes it a no-brainer when we look at the data this way, right? So the decisions become much simpler, and you have a lot more reference points, because this is not applicable only for a certain type of SaaS companies. It is all types of SaaS companies around the world. So this pattern can emerge. This is extremely insightful. Yeah. And one more thing that we noticed as part of the report, which I wanted to cover as part of the webinar, was even the spend management category. So today, cost optimization, again, is not an option. It is becoming a crucial initiative. So in your report, 49% of the people still use spreadsheets to manage their spend management. So I believe that that's a category that has been there's a lot of players coming in. And how do you see the progression for that tech stack going?
Yeah, I mean, so important now, and I saw this, you think about the big spend items within a SaaS company, of course, people, you've got travel and this different things, but that internal use software bucket grows and grows and grows. And it's so hard as a SaaS CFO, we want to sell our product, but also we have to monitor the tools that are being used internally. So it's such a hard trade-off. But it becomes a big spend, $300, $400, $500,000 of spend just on internal use software tools. And that could be like 50, 60, 70 solutions. And I've come into companies where it's like they're using a Notion document or a spreadsheet to manage these, and figure out, and even then we're not sure. So, it's a growing area, and especially we know 2023, everybody's looking at their spend. An easy target is internal use software and those tools we use internally. Are we even using them, leveraging them, and need an easy way to track those?
Yeah, in fact, one thing that we see with a lot of our customers is people don't have the data in a centralized way. People would love to use spreadsheets, but that data is not available because of the progression of decentralized buying to promote growth in different companies. So different departments buy different tools, and finance or IT do not have a complete view of the spends that they are making in terms of software as well. So that's why when we launched Spendflo, what we did was we helped companies to centralize all their spends in one place. And we also showed them the ROI of tools that they are using. Say, for example, a lot of companies bought Zoom big time during the pandemic. And when you actually looked at the data, only 30-40% of the licenses were being consumed consistently. So we realized that there are optimization opportunities that come out of that. And second, when department heads are negotiating contracts with different SaaS vendors, and today we know the number of SaaS tools that are available, right? 3,000, 4,000 different tools out there that people use very regularly. Department heads do not have the time or the knowledge or the benchmarks to go and negotiate those contracts. So we help them to negotiate those contracts and bring those price in control as well. And we help them to stay optimal. So you have to stay optimal in your stack, remove duplicates. You can see multiple departments use different project management tools, and they apply the same for the same purpose. So we help them to reduce those things as well as part of our engagement with customers. And the best thing, what we realized is customers want to see the value, but they don't have the time or bandwidth to do it. So before we engage with the customer, we actually go and tell them, just tell us about your stack, show us what you're spending on, and we take a look at it, we run it against our benchmarks, we actually come back and transparently tell them how much we can save for them. And if the number is impactful and significant, only then we even sign a contract with customers. So that way, spend management becomes easy, transparent, and very powerful for customers. And we see the category to evolve into that as well, across not just in SaaS, but also in other categories where people want to manage it centrally, run workflows on top of it, and be on top of their spends consistently, because cost optimization is the name of the game today. So in fact, I would at this point, I would also love to run a small poll to our audience on, because I think as we keep mentioning about cost management, it is very important for people to also know how much they are spending. And it is very easy and almost, in my opinion, a no-brainer to see, run it against a benchmark and figure out how much people are spending today and are looking to save. So we just have a small poll here. So if all of you believe that your spends are high on SaaS, we can actually take a look at it and tell you how much we can save. If you're interested, just vote on the poll.
And yeah, if any questions are out there, throw those in the Q&A. I see Randy has a question, and I've calculated it for you here, Randy. Well, you can't see that, but we'll answer that shortly. But yeah, throw any questions in the Q&A, and we'll take those here soon.
Sure. I think we have enough responses on the poll. So we'll move to the next few questions that I have for you, Ben. So Ben, from what do you think are the best practices for finance leaders to keep in mind when they are choosing a tool?
So I think, when choosing a tool, again, it's what are those acute pain points? What's next in my roadmap that I need to implement? How does it work with all the other tools in our org? Who's going to be the owner of this? Who's the admin? Who's the champion? So, and also when selecting tools, please, do your homework, and tell them your use case. Don't let the vendor say, hey, here's how the tool works, all this, and this, and rely on them. You really have to do your homework, do some reference checks, and tell them how you want that solution to work for you is really important, that I've found when I've implemented different solutions, change accounting systems, all that stuff. So, and then getting your team involved, right? It can't just be you, the CFO, controller, doing it all. You've got to have that team involved. Maybe you're a person of one and it's just going to be you. But you need that team buy-in, and it just helps the implementation and go live become more successful.
Fabulous. And we've seen that across. With the team is not involved, the implementation has not been successful in a lot of cases. Okay, and next question is a very interesting one given the current situation. How to balance cost cutting and the need to invest in new technology for CFOs?
Yeah, it's hard, and I'm selling my, cash collections automation tool to CFO. So CFO to CFO sales were really interesting, because in the back office, and I've done this myself where, of course, the thing is, I don't want to start, sound cold, but, I want to hire people into my SaaS company. We want to grow and hire people and employ, but technology does delay that, so you can automate all these processes, put tech in the back office, and that improves efficiency for everyone, and it delays that hiring, unfortunately. But that's the expectations today. So we can't just solve everything with heads. We do need tech in the back office in order to refine and automate our processes. It's so important. And then our finance functions can scale as the company scales. So there is still investment needed. And I find CFOs and myself, like, we're harder on ourselves. Like, we don't need that. We can delay. And I've learned the hard way just myself is like, that was the wrong thing. It bit me in the end, that we have to invest just like every other organ in our company.
Awesome. And what are some of the mistakes that one should avoid while implementing a tool?
When implementing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, again, it's getting the team involved. And one thing I really learned is post go live, still keep some hours in your budget to refine and tweak with any tool, depending on how complex. Post go live, we're always tweaking, refining, bugs were coming up. So that was my biggest thing. At go live, don't just let that firm go away. Make sure you have regular check-ins once a week, twice a week after go live. Because there are always refinements, tweaks that you need to make with these implementations and go lives with all these tools, and they'll save you. So keep some budget there.
Awesome, cool. Thanks, Ben. And that's all the questions I had. So I want to open the forum up for the people on the webinar to ask their questions. So yeah, people, you have questions, please shoot in the Q&A box, and Ben would take them now.
Yeah, and Randy has a question. So can you share the percentage of people who are okay with best in breed versus ERP or suite solutions? And I just pulled out my trusty calculator, this I've had for 20 plus years, and 64%. So in my survey, 64% were still okay using best of breed point solutions rather than trying to solve every need within their org with a suite type product or an ERP solution. So it is still a little surprising. And I ran my tech stack survey from November, December through early January. And that was still the sentiment that, we're okay with best of breed, if it is that best solution for our company. And another question from Randy. Has this changed over the years? And actually, I'll have to look back. It's staying pretty consistent. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised, a little bit surprised, but not, that best of breed is still acceptable. Now, I would be really concerned, like if it switched and everybody 80% had wanted ERP, but still seeing that that's staying pretty consistent. That if that, like Rajiv, you said, if that solution really fits my use case, it's a slam dunk, makes my life easier, then I'm going to implement that. So yeah, great questions, Randy. Any other questions? I see a lot of familiar names out there: Steve, Valerie, Tom. But yeah, any questions? Throw them in the Q&A. Happy to answer. And then, of course, my full tech stack report. You can pull off my blog at thesaascfo.com to see the 40+ page report. So
yeah. Anahita has her hand raised. Anahita, do you have a question?
So here, I believe you highlighted software centered around revenue rec from a GAAP perspective, but since ARR is non-GAAP, which tools to report ARR have you seen companies use in your experience? So right, we know, well, ARR non-GAAP, of course, revenue recognition, and the MRR that we post to our P&L is GAAP or IFRS. But different solutions that I've seen for that. One, really today now, subscription management solutions. So you saw in the invoicing RevRec area, maybe you're using your core ERP like NetSuite, Sage, or you're using solution like Maxio, Unium, etc. That's going to pull those KPIs, those ARR numbers, bookings numbers, and create that ARR number. So probably relying on that subscription management system now to give you that, or even maybe your bookings reports coming out of your CRM system. And then any recommendations on spend management, for example, bill.com for AP and so on? Yeah, so I have a, if overall spend management category. So definitely check out that report at thesaascfo.com. I do have a general spend management category. And of course, bill.com did show up on there and some others in that space. And then Rajiv, another anonymous, how has the SaaS management space evolved over the past few years, in your opinion? So SaaS management space, really interesting, right? And Rajiv, if you want to take this too, but two new categories, right? Rajiv and Spendflo. So management of our internal use software, which is growing and growing. And then you see a new category, just general spend management within our org, looking at everything. So I'd say those are two relatively new categories that have come into play here.
In fact, one of the things that we see is SaaS management has moved on from being a pure product category to a more solution category in the past few years. So initial SaaS management category was just about getting visibility, but today SaaS management has evolved from being a category for not just getting visibility, but also control on spends. So that is the evolution that we've seen in the SaaS management category.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so new and growing category for sure. Yeah, so throw any other questions in. Randy has another question here. Do you have a market landscape view of how all the pieces come together? Randy, great question, because yeah, I publish my components separately, but I'll have to look at that, because when people answer, right, basically they're putting their tech stack in, to say, hey, I'm using QuickBooks and Maxio are using QuickBooks and bill.com. So I'll have to see, maybe there's a way I can play with the data to see if there are common kind of tech stack configurations, but I haven't checked that out, but definitely a good question.
Yeah, it would be fantastic to see that by ARR size and by geo as well, Ben, because it's like, we know that when a startup is starting up, we know that there is a bunch of tools that they go in and buy. So we see clear patterns on it. Maybe that is also something that we can look at some point of time, because we know what people are buying, at what, from who, how are they structuring it. So we have a lot of insights on that. We'll be happy to collaborate to come up with something that is more interesting on this as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think, Randy, Rajiv, it's like, that's probably the next evolution of like, all right, here are all the solutions that I publish in my report, but what is then that, I guess, best practice to bring all these together? What are people doing to complete, that overall tech stack for their org? With many companies dialing back spend in FY23, do you see those same companies not investing in spend management solutions? Boy, it's a great question. I think, now of course you see in social media now, the CFO is the major decider in these. So I think, again, my big thing is there, quick time to value, and even in my discussions now as a sales rep selling my own solution for cash collections, right? The time to value, that ROI, how are you justifying this? And I think people are even tighter now. So I could see some delay there, or right, we've just got to make a more convincing case that there is quick time to value, and it's not something that we'll realize next year, but we're going to realize in the next couple months, and it's going to enhance our existing process right away. And again, I'm finding is there a hair on fire problem? Is this a hair on fire problem that I can solve, or can I just keep doing what I'm doing, and then eventually it becomes hair on fire, but it's not right now.
And another interesting conundrum that we see, Ben, is that today budgets are very tight. So people cannot spend, like discretionary spend has gone down significantly. But that applies even to headcount. So if you still have to grow, you need to grow with lower headcount than you planned for. So the only way to do that is to buy more tools. So the impact on efficiency and the quick time to value, as I said, should be very visible. Otherwise, people cannot invest on any category, leave alone spend management, is what we see.
Yeah, I think it's harder to take that leap of faith, on the vendor's word for it, that, yep, you're going to see all this. And I think it's just got to be hit you in the face a little bit harder, that, oh, wow, I do see that those specific things that will really improve my process and make my life easier.
Another interesting.
Another question: at what stage of a company's life cycle does it make sense to move from spreadsheets to a SaaS tool? They are expensive. Yeah, and we know, but one of my common things that I like to mention is like FP&A tools, right? Because you're doing spreadsheets, and when I was bought out by private equity, their reporting demands were enormous, right? Slice and dice, quarter over quarter, year over year by product, and VLOOKUP sum ifs only take, even though I love spreadsheets, they only take you so far, and your life does become miserable. And even when I was doing, I started off in RevRec and spreadsheets, and oh my gosh, the time spent, the worrying about errors, so you reach that pain point, in these critical systems that we have to spend that money. And I work with a lot of SaaS founders, helping them with their finance. And a lot of that next solution is revenue management. It's like, I know it's an investment, but this will pay dividends down the road. So sometimes, I just talk time to value, but sometimes we'll grow into that spend. We see that time to value now will prove revenue management. And maybe that bill is big right now, but when you're a 10, 20, $30 million company, that money you spend, say, on revenue management is going to be tiny. You're going to pass audit, you're going to satisfy your board, your investors, potential investors.
And one way we think about it, Ben, is that there are some tools that you can start with today in a pretty easy way. So, for example, most companies that give you tools and with startup credits or startup program benefits, or when you're early in your journey, you can buy them at a much cheaper price. As you scale, you can also decide and choose for different alternatives. So the important thing is SaaS is expensive, but if you are on top of your stack, if you don't spend on, if you understand whether you're getting the right ROI from the tool, and you seek help in terms of negotiating those contracts for you, I think it can still be well under control.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm now learning this as a SaaS founder. It's like, how are we getting our product? How are we monetizing it? Do we have to have a free trial, a paid trial, get them and improve the ROI? And then, then they don't want you to turn you off. So important. That's, CFOs working with their product team, working with sales. How is the product evolving? How do we want to sell it? What new features, upsells, cross-sells do we need? In order to prove value and increase value over time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your time again, Ben. Again, really insightful report. A lot of knowledge for all finance leaders globally, I would say. So it's a must read. And thank you. Thank you for your time, and always a pleasure collaborating with you.
Thanks, Rajiv. Really appreciate it. We know tech stack is important, a big focus now for finance and accounting. So hope everyone enjoyed it. And thanks for joining today.